It was a quiet Wednesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona. Kyle sat at a small, cozy cafe, fingers tapping rhythmically on his laptop as he typed up an article for a travel magazine. The clink of coffee cups and the soft hum of quiet conversations surrounded him, a perfect backdrop for his work. At 33, Kyle had carved out a comfortable life with his wife, Mia, a dedicated veterinarian. They had been married for 6 years, a seemingly perfect match, both content with their peaceful existence. They had no children, preferring instead to focus on their careers and indulge in their shared passion for travel. Together they explored the world, creating memories in distant places. As he typed, Kyle's mind drifted to the evening ahead, another quiet night at home. He glanced at his phone and noticed a message from Mia. The text read simply, "How about we invite Nicole over this weekend?" Kyle paused, his fingers frozen midair above the keys. He had never heard of a Nicole before. Who was she? Why was Mia suggesting this out of the blue? A small flicker of curiosity, maybe even unease, passed through him, but he quickly brushed it aside. Mia was a private person, and though they had been together for years, there were always aspects of her life that Kyle didn't know much about. Maybe this was just another old friend she had reconnected with. He sighed, trying to ease the knot of suspicion in his chest. "Sure," he typed back, "that sounds fine." Later that evening, when Mia came home from her shift at the animal clinic, Kyle mentioned the message. She smiled but didn't offer much more detail. "Nicole is an old friend from med school," she explained casually. "We've just started talking again after a long time." Kyle nodded, his thoughts still circling the name. Nicole. Why hadn't Mia mentioned her before? Mia's easygoing demeanor didn't help ease Kyle's doubts, and a sense of discomfort lingered in the back of his mind, though he told himself he was overthinking it. The weekend was still days away, but as the week wore on, Kyle's thoughts kept returning to that conversation. Every time Mia mentioned Nicole, she became noticeably more distant, more secretive. It wasn't like Mia to keep secrets, at least not from him, but the unease in Kyle's chest grew as each day passed. By Thursday, Kyle was restless. He had the day off and decided to work from home. He sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. Mia had just left for her morning rounds at the clinic, and for the first time, Kyle found himself glancing at her phone. There was something about the way Mia had been acting lately, a subtle shift he couldn't ignore. He hadn't thought much of it at first, but now, in the silence of their home, the urge to understand what was going on became overwhelming. He picked up her phone, feeling a wave of guilt but pushing it aside. Mia was a private person, but they had never hidden anything from each other. With a shaky breath, Kyle opened the messages. As he scrolled through the recent conversations, his heart stopped. The name Nicole appeared again and again, but this time the messages were different. They weren't just friendly catch-ups from old school days. They were intimate, filled with affection, and the kind of words that left Kyle feeling sick to his stomach. "I can't wait to see you this weekend," one message read, followed by a string of heart emojis. Another one made Kyle's pulse race. "Do you think we can pick up where we left off?" Kyle's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of what he was seeing. Nicole wasn't just a friend. She was someone Mia had been involved with long before Kyle entered the picture. It was obvious now, this wasn't a mere reunion. It was something more, something secret. And the more he read, the more his heart shattered. His stomach churned and the room felt smaller. A whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, confusion, flooded his mind. He didn't know what to feel first. Mia had been hiding this from him, keeping him in the dark while she rekindled an old flame. When Mia walked through the door that evening, Kyle was waiting for her. He didn't say a word as she took off her coat and set her things down. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken words. Mia looked up, noticing the tension in the air. "Kyle?" she said hesitantly. "Who is Nicole?" he asked, his voice strained. Mia's expression faltered for just a moment and then she sighed. She had been expecting this. Slowly, she sat down beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Kyle, I never meant for you to find out this way," Mia began. "Nicole and I, before I met you, we were together. We were in love, but I let her go when I started my life with you. I thought that part of me was behind me." Kyle's chest tightened as he listened, but Mia continued, her words coming in fits and starts. "And now, I don't know. We've been talking again and I don't know what to feel. I'm confused. I'm stuck between you and her." Kyle's world tilted. He couldn't understand how this could have happened. He felt betrayed not just by the affair, but by the lies that had been woven into the fabric of their life together. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted. Had she been lying to him all this time? In the days that followed, Kyle couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal that weighed on him. His thoughts were a constant storm of doubt and pain. But the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. His life with Mia, everything he thought he knew, was a lie. It was time to make a decision. And that decision would change everything. The days following Kyle's discovery were a blur. He spent his time pacing the apartment, unable to sit still. The walls seemed to close in on him as he wrestled with the weight of his emotions. Mia had tried to apologize, to explain, but each time she spoke, Kyle felt a deeper sense of anger and hurt. The trust he had once placed in her was shattered, and no amount of explanation could put the pieces back together. On Friday evening, Mia came home early from the clinic. Kyle was sitting on the couch, his laptop open in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. He hadn't been able to write or focus on anything. Every time he tried, his thoughts drifted back to Nicole, to the messages, to the betrayal. He had to know the truth, and he needed answers, even if it meant hearing things he didn't want to hear. Mia stood in the doorway, hesitating for a moment before stepping into the room. Her eyes were red, as though she had been crying, but Kyle couldn't bring himself to feel sympathy. His heart was still in pieces, and no amount of tears could fix it. "Kyle," she said softly, her voice shaky. "I know you're angry. I don't blame you, but you have to understand that it wasn't about you." Kyle looked up at her, his eyes hard. "Then what was it about, Mia? You lied to me. You kept this from me. All this time you've been hiding it." Mia's face crumpled with guilt, but Kyle couldn't bring himself to care. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. His eyes locked onto hers, and he spoke again, his voice low and steady, though the fury simmered just beneath the surface. "I want the truth, Mia. No more excuses. No more, I was confused. What is going on between you and Nicole?" Mia took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for what she had to say. She sat down beside him, her hands clasped tightly together. "I never meant to hurt you, Kyle. I swear. When Nicole and I started talking again, it felt like we picked up where we left off. There were feelings that I thought I'd buried, feelings I didn't realize were still there. I got confused. I got lost. I never thought I'd hurt you like this, but I did." Kyle's jaw tightened. The words stung, but they weren't enough. He needed to understand why Mia hadn't come to him, why she had let this happen. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. He couldn't stay here, not in this house, not with all the memories that felt tainted now. "I can't do this anymore, Mia," Kyle said, his voice hoarse. "I can't pretend everything is okay when I know what's been going on behind my back." Mia's face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over," Kyle replied flatly. "I can't stay in a marriage built on lies. I'm leaving." The words hit Mia like a slap to the face. She reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to touch his arm. "Kyle, please, don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake. A huge mistake, but I can fix this. We can fix this." Kyle pulled away from her, his heart breaking with every word. "You don't get it, Mia. This isn't about a mistake. This is about trust. And you destroyed it." With that, Kyle stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Mia watched in shock as he grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. "I'll take care of the divorce papers," he said, his voice cold, before stepping out into the night. The door closed behind him, and Mia stood there, frozen. Her heart ached, but she knew that Kyle's decision was final. There was no going back. The following days were a blur of legal paperwork and fleeting moments of numbness. Kyle found himself alone in their once shared home, packing his things. The apartment felt hollow now, devoid of the warmth it had once held. Every corner reminded him of what he had lost. He could still see the places where they had laughed together, where they had talked late into the night, sharing dreams of the future. But now, those memories were just remnants of a life that had ended in betrayal. He didn't want to think about Mia anymore. He didn't want to think about Nicole. He just wanted to escape, to find solace in something that wasn't broken. His phone buzzed, but he ignored it. It was Mia again, calling, texting, begging him to talk to her. But Kyle couldn't bring himself to respond. The more he heard from her, the more he realized that he had made the right choice. A week later, Kyle moved into a small apartment in Arcadia, a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix. The apartment was far from glamorous, but it was his own. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild. He spent his days writing, diving into larger projects he had put off for years. He also began running again, something he hadn't done in months, but the rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement brought a sense of calm, of peace. But even in the quiet of his new life, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness. He was alone in a way he had never been before. He had lost not just his wife, but his sense of security, his trust in others. He had thought Mia was his soulmate, his partner, someone he could count on. But now all that was left was the echo of what had been, and the painful reality of what he had to let go. Kyle's new life in Arcadia was quiet, almost too quiet. The apartment was small, but it had everything he needed: a bed, a desk for writing, and a small kitchen where he could make coffee in the mornings. The first few days were a blur, a haze of packing, moving, and avoiding phone calls from Mia. Her messages became more desperate as time went on, but Kyle ignored them. He needed space, needed to think without the constant reminders of the life they had shared. His days were filled with writing. At first he found it hard to concentrate. Every time he sat down to work, his mind would wander back to the betrayal, to the hurt, to the mess that his life had become. But slowly, the rhythm of words on a page began to soothe him. He threw himself into his work, tackling projects he had put off for years, pouring his emotions into his writing. It wasn't the same as feeling whole again, but it was a distraction, a way to keep the pain at bay. Kyle also took up running again, something he had done in his younger years but had let slip away. Running had always been a way for him to clear his head, to push past the noise of the world and focus on himself. Now it became his sanctuary. Every morning he would lace up his sneakers and head out, the cool desert air filling his lungs as he ran along the trails. The miles passed in a blur, and for a few moments he could almost forget the life he had left behind. But no matter how far he ran, the ache in his chest never fully disappeared. He had tried to distance himself from everything Mia, from everything that reminded him of her. But the pain lingered like a shadow, following him wherever he went. Mia, on the other hand, was left behind to pick up the pieces of her own broken life. Without Kyle, she found herself adrift, lost in a sea of confusion. She had lost her marriage, but more than that, she had lost herself. The scandal of the affair had cost her more than just Kyle. She had lost her job as a veterinarian too. The clinic had let her go, unwilling to deal with the fallout of her personal life spilling into her professional one. Mia moved into a small apartment in the same neighborhood, a few blocks away from Kyle's, though they had not spoken since the night he left. She didn't know what to do next. Her world had unraveled so quickly, and the guilt and shame weighed heavily on her. She had always prided herself on being independent, strong, and in control. But now she felt small, broken, and unsure of who she even was. Nicole had tried to reach out to her a few times after the fallout, but Mia had distanced herself from her as well. She couldn't bear to face the woman who had been part of the affair, especially after everything that had happened. Nicole too was confused. She had thought she could rekindle something with Mia, but the reality of the situation was much more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The affair had hurt everyone involved, and Nicole found herself questioning her own choices. Mia spent her days in a haze of regret, staring at the walls of her apartment, unable to sleep. She tried to reach out to Kyle, but each time she did, he shut her out. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and she knew that she couldn't undo the damage. But she still couldn't help herself. She wanted to fix it, wanted to find a way back to him, to the life they had built together. But Kyle wasn't coming back. Not now. Not ever. As weeks passed, both of their lives began to settle into a new rhythm, a rhythm that didn't involve each other. Mia threw herself into rebuilding her career, trying to find a new job, but the weight of her past decisions always lingered. Kyle, on the other hand, found new focus in his writing. He had more time to travel now, more time to explore the places he had once dreamed of visiting. Yet, no matter where he went, the pain of the betrayal followed him. It was a constant reminder of what he had lost, and no matter how much he tried to move forward, it felt as though a piece of him would always be missing. The emotional distance between them grew, and soon, Mia was nothing more than a shadow in Kyle's life. She was no longer a part of his present or his future. He had to accept that their marriage had been nothing more than an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had come crashing down. He wasn't angry anymore. The anger had turned into something else, something quieter, deeper. It was sadness. A sadness that lived inside him, reminding him of everything that could have been but never would be. Mia too learned to live without him. She had no choice but to move on. She couldn't keep living in the past, couldn't keep yearning for something that was gone. Slowly, painfully, she began to rebuild her life, brick by brick. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when she wanted to give up, but she kept going. For herself, if nothing else. She found new purpose in helping animals in need, volunteering at shelters and clinics. It wasn't the same as her old career, but it was a start. Mia knew it wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was the life she had now. And she would have to learn how to live it, even if it meant doing so without Kyle by her side. Months had passed since Kyle left Mia, and though the rawness of the pain had dulled, it still lingered quietly in the corners of his life. He had come to terms with the fact that his marriage was over, that the woman he had loved and trusted would never be the same. He wasn't angry anymore, but he wasn't at peace either. What had once been a comfortable, predictable life now felt like a distant memory, one that belonged to someone else, someone he no longer recognized. Kyle had settled into a new routine in his small apartment in Arcadia, a neighborhood filled with quiet streets and an easy, almost idyllic pace of life. His days were spent writing, running, and exploring the desert landscape. It wasn't much, but it was his. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to look over his shoulder, to wait for something to fall apart. He had learned over time how to fill the silence. At first, it was the absence of Mia's presence that haunted him. The quiet was oppressive, like an empty space that no amount of work or distraction could fill. But with each passing day, he found that it became easier to sit with the silence. He had learned to listen to the quiet hum of his own thoughts, to trust himself again. Kyle had even started to find joy in the small things. He spent weekends hiking the nearby trails, taking in the vast desert landscape, its sweeping views that stretched out into endless horizons. There was something therapeutic about the open space, something that reminded him of the freedom he had regained. He would often run along the same paths, the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the gravel providing a grounding sense of release. The sun setting over the desert, casting golden hues over the mountains, became his sanctuary, a place where he could feel at peace with himself. One evening, as Kyle was walking back from a run, he decided to stop at a small local cafe. The place had a quiet, welcoming atmosphere, old wooden chairs, soft lighting, and the faint aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. It was exactly the kind of place Kyle had come to love. He sat down at a corner table, ordering a cup of coffee and a pastry, content to watch the world go by. It was there, in that quiet little cafe, that he met her. Her name was Emma. She was sitting at the table next to his, absorbed in a book, her eyes focused intently on the pages. Her dark hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and she had an easy, comfortable smile that Kyle found immediately calming. She didn't look up when he sat down, but Kyle couldn't help but notice how peaceful she seemed. She exuded a quiet confidence, a kind of calm that Kyle hadn't felt in a long time. After a few minutes, she looked up from her book and caught Kyle's eye. She smiled, a simple but genuine gesture, and Kyle felt his heart skip a beat. He wasn't sure why, but there was something about her, something warm and familiar, that made him want to strike up a conversation. "Mind if I ask what you're reading?" he asked, his voice tentative. Emma looked at him, a playful glint in her eyes. "It's a bit of a guilty pleasure actually," she said with a laugh. "A detective novel. Probably not the most intellectual choice, but it's fun." Kyle smiled back, feeling a strange comfort in her openness. "I don't think there's anything wrong with a little fun reading," he said. "Sometimes it's the best kind." They chatted for a few minutes, the conversation flowing easily, and for the first time in a long while, Kyle felt something stir inside him. It wasn't love, he wasn't ready for that, but it was the faintest spark of connection. Over the next few weeks, Kyle found himself returning to the cafe more often, and Emma was always there. Sometimes they would sit together and talk for hours, exchanging stories about their lives, their hopes, their favorite books. Emma had a way of making him feel heard, understood, and for the first time in a while, Kyle realized he could open up without fear of being judged. There was no history between them, no baggage, just two people getting to know each other in the present moment. Their conversations became a highlight of Kyle's days. It wasn't like with Mia. There was no history, no past that needed to be untangled. There was just a quiet simplicity, a chance to connect with someone who wasn't wrapped up in the turmoil of his past. It felt easy, and that was something Kyle hadn't experienced in a long time. Eventually, Kyle asked Emma to dinner. She agreed with a smile, and they spent the evening at a small restaurant on the outskirts of town. It was casual, unpretentious, but it felt right. Kyle felt the stirrings of something new, something different from what he had experienced with Mia. It wasn't a rush of passion, but a gentle pull, a quiet connection that he was willing to explore. Mia, on the other hand, was still finding her way. The months without Kyle had been difficult, and while she had begun to rebuild her life, it wasn't without its struggles. She had found work at an animal shelter, and though it wasn't the prestigious job she had once held, it gave her a sense of purpose. She still volunteered at clinics when she could, helping animals in need. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step forward. Despite her progress, there were nights when Mia still thought about Kyle. She missed him, missed the life they had shared. But she also knew that she couldn't turn back the clock. She had made her choices, and they had led her down a path she could never undo. One day, Mia found herself walking along the streets of Arcadia, the neighborhood where Kyle had moved. She wasn't sure why she had come, but something in her pulled her there, as if she needed to see him one last time. She stood across the street from the small cafe where Kyle had spent so many hours writing, but she didn't go in. She just stood there watching, feeling the weight of her past pressing down on her. Kyle was moving on. And she knew that, as much as it hurt, she had to do the same.